What's up, y'all, and welcome to Uncultured Universe, the podcast where friends and lovers alike show each other movies, TV, music, or books just to get a little bit more culture in their life. I am your humble host, Justin, and with me, as always, in the uncultured spot, Joe. Welcome, Joe.
Hey.
Hey, everybody. Today, we're going to be doing something just a little bit different. So, seeing as Uncultured Universe has not only been like on the air for 2 years. This also marks our like 50, like technically like our 50th episode,
We
which is nothing to
we
sneeze at.
yeah, we had to do like some special math to get here because there there were famously like two episodes that we started with that were never released because we
Yeah.
were really trying to get an idea of like style and the framework of this podcast, and those episodes ended up being like 2 to 3 hours long, if I
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah. It
uh,
was not the vibe.
and then we had like some one-off episodes over the past couple years related to like we talked about like a music recap, we had like a book recap, and so doing some special maths, we're basically closing in on our 50th episode, and
Yeah,
so
we
we
cooked the books a little bit to get to 50, which is fine. It's our own business. We can do whatever we want.
can do whatever
So
we want. We are gods.
we're gods in our own right. So we decided to sort of throw the core tenets of this podcast out the fucking window temporarily, of
Hmm.
course. So instead of showing each other a movie that the other hasn't seen, we're going to instead discuss our respective favorite movies of all time. And for this month, we're just going to look at my pick, my favorite movie, Forrest Gump. And we're going to dub this series Uncultured Universe Culture Club because Joe has seen this movie. I have seen this movie. Damn near everybody has seen this flick. So it stands to reason that we're breaking our own rules. So, why the hell not just do something a little bit different? So, we're going to circle back around to this concept eventually again in the future with Joe's pick, which is going to be quite the undertaking. Because Joe's favorite movie of all time is the 12-hour complete unedited director's cut special. What is it, like, special edition of
Extended edition.
extended edition of the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
All three movies, and including the trivia that comes on the DVD, all the things, and that's Joe's pick. But we'll
when
come
i
back to it.
Yeah, when I say like what's my favorite movie, I will typically say Lord of the Rings and just hope that the person doesn't like ask me to specify. And so it's easy to treat Lord of the Rings as one movie in that sense, but when you're trying to cover it for a podcast, we were like, whoa,
Whoa.
that's going to be a whole weekend worth of watching Lord of the Rings.
Which, I
Um,
mean, there are worse ways to spend the weekend.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've done it before. So yeah, we may like sprinkle that in going forward. But we'll cover Forrest Gump now as kind of our little September mini series for what we're dubbing as Culture Club.
Yeah, Culture Club. Like, and what another fun callback to when we used to work together. We had a a group that was different people from different departments that would come together, and they were essentially the party planning committee. That's what the
Yeah.
Culture Club was, where we worked, and that was fun. But yeah, let's come back to the star at hand and talk about Forrest Gump. Now, this movie, for as long as I can remember, the concept of like what's your favorite movie,
Mhm.
this has always been my go-to answer, and I mean it earnestly because this movie is so goddamn good.
I can't. I was watching this movie this past week, and I can't imagine like this being my first time watching it and just not knowing anything
Yeah,
about it going into it, because I think it just has ingrained itself in culture
yeah,
so hard to the point where like almost every line from this is quotable.
100%.
Um,
Yeah,
and so like the there's weird parallels in like the character of Forrest Gump in the movie becoming so much part of the thread of American culture, and then going forward, this movie itself becoming so much part of the thread of American culture from the 90s onward.
oh, dude, yes, it definitely reaches that level of uncanniness, that level of meta, but,
Hmm.
the author of the book, Winston Groom, wrote a sequel, to the book in 1995, and that movie that book references the movie.
Yeah.
Tom
So like
Hanks as a third level character. So even then, it gets even more meta. It is insane. We'll get to that in a second because I wanna talk about that. Because holy shit.
Um, yeah, so Forrest Gump is your favorite movie of all time. You can't ever really remember it not being your favorite movie. What was like your first touch point here? Do you remember like seeing it in theaters or no?
Didn't see it in theaters. I saw it so it this movie released June 23rd, 1994. I did not see it in theaters, but I remember us owning it not too long after it came to home VHS, and I remember watching it. We were living in Texas at the time, and I remember seeing it for the first time, there with one of my aunts, and, it was just I was enthralled with the movie because I was like,
Mhm.
"I have no idea what this is about. Let's check this out." And this movie has everything. It's about growing up. It's about, socio-political struggles. It's about, common like all these things. And it just for some reason, like to an 8-year-old, I was just like, "This movie is awesome."
It's magical and it's just like such an easy watch too. Like you
Mhm.
can just like sit back and the time just flies by watching this movie.
Yeah, it's kind of a longer movie. It's, over 2 hours long. We had to take 2 nights to watch this, but, yeah, it moves at such a fast clip.
Mhm.
It doesn't feel like a long movie. Maybe towards the end, like towards the last, maybe the last quarter of the movie, it starts to drag just a little bit,
Mhm.
like once he comes out of storytelling mode. I think, but largely this movie moves from set piece to set piece, from story to story. It moves like a very shortened book. I haven't read the book um, before, so that's how I imagine. You're telling this story of this person. Within a couple inches of book, you got to move pretty quickly.
Yeah, I always forget like the last quarter of this movie. It's almost like a twist because I always forget it. Is like he's not on the bus the whole entire time. Like the first 75% of this movie, he's telling a story and then it like catches up with real time and then he's just moving forward
Yeah.
from there. But I think the structure of this movie and that framing device of him telling it is kind of the key to it being like just like such an easy thing to swallow.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I did this over 2 nights too. Like you. I thought it would be more 50-50, like splitting between like his childhood portions with like Sally Field
Hmm.
versus his adults. And so I like hit pause once, it switches to them in high school. And I was like, oh, this we're like 20 minutes into this.
I know there's
This is
so
not
much more movie left. Yeah, it's insane. Okay, so just real quick, anytime you say something or anytime a quote pops into either one of our heads, just feel free to throw it in. You said,
okay.
I thought it was going to be 50-50. Hey, man, I'm telling you, split it down the middle. I'm talking 50-50. So, to just hit on that, this movie is infinitely quotable. Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, this movie moves so fast. They go from the kid version to young teenage, obviously grand adult Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, which is so fun. I forgot that happened so quickly. The with the run scene, the run Forest run scene.
Mhm.
Insane. It just comes up really quickly. But I the some of the reasoning that I throw behind, why I say that this is my favorite movie is that I already said it, but like this movie has it all. It's a really heartfelt story. It's a fun storytelling framing device. It's got war, it's got like adventure, it's got like political intrigue, it's got hard-hitting social commentary. Like this movie packs a lot in and it says a lot of things,
Mhm.
which I find, upon this most recent rewatch, really poignant and really, you know, topical and just really interesting. And I've read some stuff on Wikipedia that this movie used to be, and maybe still is, lauded as like a heavily conservative movie, like conservative ideals. And I want to talk
Hmm.
about that in a little bit, but um, it's interesting to go back and look at it upon this most recent rewatch, and then taking the societal temperature of current affairs and everything, and just like, huh, that's pretty interesting. The things that
Yeah,
this movie shows.
I mean, I've definitely heard that angle on it too. Like I've listened to like whole other podcasts about this movie where they've covered like Forrest Gump and talked about like how it's maybe like a really like rose tinted glasses look at like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and the major events that shaped America then.
Yeah,
But I'm with you. I don't necessarily fully agree with that. I think this movie is all about like um, perspective and how we are able to handle the good and bad in life based off of like our own actions and then also the actions of the people who support and create our environment. And so to kind of bring that into like actual examples in the movies, like I think the key thing that makes this movie works is the parallel storylines that it has between Forrest and Jenny. So Forrest is obviously the main character and he gets most of the time in the movie, but the recurring bit is that he is living out all of these events in parallel with Jenny, his love interest.
right.
And so you get Forrest, who's kind of this like biologically inclined optimist, and is literally just dropped into major historical event after major historical event and is just walking through life, running through life, being nice to folks. And he has a great mama and he has like a great background, and he has this outlook on life that is so powerful that it spreads around him. And then you
Hmm.
have like a parallel storyline happening with Jenny, and they kind of intercross in this like braided storyline where she comes in and out of his life years at a time. And so you can really tell how like her much shittier childhood shapes her outlook,
Yeah,
and like how she's maybe dealing with more of like the realities of these years in
yeah,
certain ways, and she's dealing it with the way like a quote unquote normal person
right.
would deal with it.
Yeah, one way I saw is that I saw it put is that like Forrest was living and upholding like conservative family values or whatever, or
Hmm.
like the conservative family life track or whatever that like Bob Dole and whoever the fuck in the early 90s were just like glomming onto. Like, going to war and all this kind of stuff, like serving his country and starting a business, all this kind of stuff, while Jenny is living like the liberal lifestyle of experimenting with drugs and sex and
Hmm.
like having a really bad time. So it's like, see what happens. So like that's one take, a bad take on it
Yeah.
of just like, see what happens, hippies. That's why like you gotta like buy American for American. And it's just like that's the worst thing I've ever read. I think this movie is more about the heart of Forrest of being he says himself, he's not a smart man, but he knows what love is, and he's known all along that he's loved Jenny, even though if it is misplaced, it's even not reciprocated or whatever. But wherever he goes, he just exudes humanity.
Hmm.
You see that with his relationship with Lieutenant Dan. You see that with his relationship with Bubba, and inspiring hope to others, and hope comes up a bunch. So like I think that is more of the message and more of the key tenet of this story, of this movie, and not about like the raucous ways of the 60s and drug addled ways of the 70s and all this kind of stuff of just like good versus bad lifestyles and Americanisms and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I mean, smarter people than us have analyzed this movie. Let's be clear. But I think where we're probably both coming to this is like this movie is so popular and achieved such popularity like right when it came out in the 90s, and it became such like a big cultural moment, and it is about cultural moments, so it all kind of gets multiplied, and so you really quickly get um these like stereotypes that are put onto these characters, particularly of Forrest and Jenny. And so you
Yeah.
get kind of like the conservative values thrust on Forrest, conservative view, I mean, the liberal view thrust on Jenny. And I mean, we could argue how much the movie is in on this idea, but it really
I don't think
appears
it
like,
is. Yeah.
well, it really appears like so much of the movie is about like how they both exist and represent maybe these two different worlds, but they really
Sure.
find their most value and their most like humanity on an individual level when they're
Mhm.
both just like one on one with each
Yeah.
other.
Right.
And like they fit together in that way,
Like
regardless.
peas and carrots.
Right, right. Like regardless of like the groups that they may belong to or the
Sure.
values that they may be representing, that it's more about them as people is when this movie is at its strongest.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and you nailed it too, of like looking at their upbringing and things like that. Like they both faced adversity in different ways, but one path, in this case of Jenny's, is way darker than
Mhm.
Forrest's. Coming from a sexually abused background, or it's inferred that way, and meager farm lifestyle, that kind of a thing. Like, of course, it's going to be get desperate, skewed realities of self-worth and love. And of course, she's going to be more susceptible to, some of the other proclivities of the time and that kind of stuff. So it's a really interesting take. Whereas, you look at Forrest's upbringing, you know, um, disabilities and other things like that that come into his life. But Sally Field, his mom, playing like the the uplifter of Forrest, to imbue his brain and his life with this, optimistic view of just like, hey, life's like a box of chocolates. You never know what's going to happen, kind of a thing. And it's like you can't help it. So he makes the best of every situation, no matter what. And so I think largely this movie comes down to parenting.
Really?
It's a full stop.
I mean,
Period.
it is kind of bookended with the idea of parents kind of forming their children and vice versa, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Yeah, let's dig into some meat and, potatoes here in a second, but, about parenting and Mrs. Gump. But, so this movie, obviously directed by Robert Zemeckis, the powerhouse, brought us such hit movies like, Back to the Future trilogy,
Hmm.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Contact, Castaway, The Polar Express, A Christmas Carol. Did like a back to back kind of like Christmas thing. Really loves Tom Hanks. His most recent thing being Here, where Tom Hanks and Robin Wright come back. It's the movie that's
A
essentially a stage
repairing.
play,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is really neat. I haven't seen it. I don't even know if it's released yet.
I don't think it is.
Oh,
I think it might be like a Christmas thing.
that feels like a Christmas movie.
But yeah, Zemeckis, from what I know about him, is known for uh, like kind of pushing the envelope in terms of like technology within film. And
Mm.
so I really want to talk about the way visuals effects are used in this movie because I think it's really
Oh,
interesting. And then
yeah.
in later years in his career, he gets really into like motion capture in film
Mm.
as well. So he does like what were you saying? Like Polar
Polar
Express. He
Express.
does like the Christmas Carol where like it really flirts with the uncanny valley.
Yeah,
Um
with Polar Express, he was kind of like early on the scene, so like some of those scenes like are really weird and really unsettling with Tom
uh-huh.
Hanks. And then like a couple years later, that's when he did the Christmas Carol, A Christmas Carol with Jim Carrey, and like the technology got better. It looks better, like you get more finer detail, but it's still very uncanny valley technological madness, which is what he
Mhm.
does. But yeah, like you look at Back to the Future and this movie, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Contact, even. Um, yeah, big pushes for technological advances in film. Very cool stuff. Love Zemeckis. We're a Zemeckis household. Um, Screenplay by Eric Roth, and the story. again by Winston Groom, who wrote the book in 1986. Now, here's where I want to take a little veer off and talk about the sequel that he wrote in 1995 called Gump
Uh-huh.
and Co. So he released this the year following the movie's release. And this, Joe, I read the plot synopsis and it is insane.
Is it just more stuff? Does he go to space?
I wish, but it's so much worse. Okay, here we go. You ready? Bubba Gump Shrimp goes under
Oh no.
because there's like a boom in the shrimping industry and Bubba Gump Shrimp can't keep up. So they go under. So he has to find a job as a janitor at a strip club where he then meets a former like colleague or athlete that he played football with in college who convinces him to try out for the New York Saints. He makes it, or not New York Saints, sorry, New Orleans Saints, the football team. And then he helps the team rise through the ranks and stuff like that by like just being a good player. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
And then he's later cut from the team when he skips a game because Jenny dies. So it's like she doesn't die in the original book,
Oh
but in
my
this
god.
one she dies. So he has to skip a game. So then they cut him from the team. Like what? What does that say? Um, so then he's again like he doesn't have anything to do. So he sells encyclopedias door to door. He somehow inadvertently helps create new Coke in the 80s. And then he operates a pig farm, but all of those end in disaster somehow. He later gets recruited in the Marines and then goes to Iran. He meets Ronald Reagan, goes to jail due to some sort of unsavory clandestine mission that they have to go on. When he's released, he then works on Wall Street with some people. He sleeps with some random assistant or whatever, and then he sees Jenny's ghost.
Okay.
And then he meets some like beer maiden from East Germany. He gets recruited for the Marine football team in East Germany. And during a game, he punts the ball clear over the Berlin Wall, which then leads to them tearing down the wall. And then he's deployed to the Persian Gulf War, where he is then reunited with Lieutenant Dan. They sent him too, who finally gets his destiny of dying on the battlefield. And then he
Oh
starts
god.
I know. So then he starts an oyster business with his son, and then he meets the Clintons. Like, insane story.
Oh. See, that sounds awful though.
Yeah.
Like that just
There's more stuff to it where he meets Tom Hanks in New York
mhm.
City, and he goes on, like, the David Letterman show or something, like, it's ridiculous. Then, like, the events of the movie cause trouble for Forrest the real Forrest Gump's life. It's an insane story, it sounds like.
I don't know. It seems kind of crazy because like Forrest Gump was such a hit that they didn't immediately have like some sort of sequel or follow up to it. But then
That wasn't in the norm that wasn't the normative in the '90s.
yeah,
If a successful movie happened, you just said, "Congratulations, now what are we gonna do? What other new thing can we do?" Instead of just, like, crank out another sequel, fuck it.
yeah, because Hanks goes into like rom com territory. I mean, like he does is You've Got Mail right after Forrest Gump, but I do know that like Forrest Gump is the second year consecutively that Tom Hanks wins the Best Actor Academy Award. So he won it for Philadelphia and then he won it for Forrest Gump. So I almost
Yeah.
think like were we experiencing Hanks fatigue in the way that like Anne Hathaway or like J Law had to go away for a few years, recently,
I think I remember reading that, like, he was like, it was only talked about for, like, maybe 40 minutes, and
Right.
I you can't make me do it. I'll only do it if it's, like, it's a good script, it's a good story, but, like, it was never seriously considered.
Right. And even today in during a time when we're constantly like remaking things and doing legacy sequels of things, I don't think you could ever have like a Gump legacy project where it's like Forrest
Oh,
Gump's son
no,
and
you
then
totally yeah.
Hank's cameos.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, you could yeah, with Haley Joel Osment, like, I would love that. That would be fun, but, like, it's still Forrest kind of, like, bumbling around in the background, like,
well,
inadvertently saving people on 9/11 and just, like, all this kinda stuff, like, that would be ridiculous. They would do that if they did
well,
a legacy sequel.
I have a thought there because I think like part of the appeal of Forrest Gump is not just like Forrest Gump as a character and Hank's performance, although I think he really is like wonderful in this movie.
Mm.
I think a big part of the appeal of this movie and it's like its staying power is the gimmick of like Forrest moving through time and having all these touch points in American history. And I think you get kind of like a spiritual successor to that in something like did you see Ready Player One recently in like the last 5 years or so?
No, but I'm aware that, like, it's an IP person's
Yeah.
wet dream kind of a thing.
Yeah, yeah. So I think of something like that as like a next generation version of this, where it's I mean it's not like Forrest Gump at all in terms of story, but it's like this sci-fi near futuristic novel that is so like embedded in nostalgia for like the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And
Mhm.
it is about how those concepts and ideals like uh are swirling around this one guy's head and he builds this entire world out of it. And
Yeah.
so you get a lot of like callbacks that people in the audience can kind of point at the screen and recognize, and like that flavor of things is kind of the same as what's happening in Forrest Gump, even though it's not like a sequel or follow-up in any way.
Sure, sure, yeah, like, that example of Ready Player One is kind of the flavor of modern nostalgia
Hmm.
porn, essentially, where it's just, like, reference after reference after reference, cram everything in, and that way
Hmm.
everyone is just constantly pointing at the screen and, like, nudging their buddy in their seat, be like, "Hey, did you catch that? That's so fun." And it's just bite-sized little compostable shit that you can post on Instagram
Hmm.
versus I think this kind of flavor from the mid 90s with Forrest Gump, it was a lot more thoughtful in terms of the references of moving through history. Um and the way that you can tell the passage of time or a roundabout the year is like when like all right, what presidential figure is getting an assassination attempt at right now. It's like, oh, there goes Johnson, and okay, so we're at 1960 whatever the hell. And
Just like the recurring bits where every 45 minutes in this movie, he's like, I had to meet the president again, or someone shot that man again.
yeah, I know. It's just like, oh, damn, when you look at it that way, like, that's really depressing. You look at the historical context of it. But, like, doing something thoughtful and contained of just, like, major historical events, and that way is, uh, while not as rewarding from a hit per minute kind of basis like it is currently, with movies like Ready Player One and like Infinity War and Deadpool and Wolverine, that kind of a
Hmm.
thing, where it's just filled with tongue in cheek, joke after joke, and reference after reference. Like, I think this is a more thoughtful approach. It's essentially like the "We Didn't Start the Fire" by, you know, it's just reference after reference after reference after thing, and it's too
No,
much. It's too much.
I totally agree with you. I think this movie succeeds in a way that those other movies don't because of the strength of its main character at the core.
Hmm.
And how like when all of the pop culture American history references are cut away, you
Hmm.
still have like the story of
Still a good
this
story.
guy and
Yeah.
the characters in his life.
Yeah.
And so like the bulk of this movie is almost like a montage of him moving through life. You definitely have chapters. It's like a book. You have his football chapter. You have him in Vietnam. You have him doing ping pong. You have him running. You have him shrimping, Lieutenant
Hmm.
Dan, and all of that. But like I found like the most like emotionally resonant moments to be when he kind of like his in between moments in between all of those. And so the moments when he's back in Greenbow, and then the moments when he's back with Jenny throughout all of that.
Yeah.
And so it kind of shows the strength of this movie in that the the cultural gimmickness of it
Yeah.
is more of like a side thing.
Mhm.
And this
100%.
movie really rises during like the one-on-one character moments.
Absolutely. And the thing that helps that rise, is definitely the theme done by Alvin or Alan Silvestri.
Oh my
God,
god.
it's such a good theme. I forgot all about it,
I
but
cannot believe that didn't also win the Oscar. I'm gonna look up what actually won
oh, I
instead.
got you. So they went home with 6 Academy Awards.
Yeah.
Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Tom Hanks, Best Adapted Screenplay, we love a screenplay adaptation, Best Visual Effects, and Best Film Editing,
Hmm.
which is great. So, like, big time, big dick swinging at the Academy Awards that year, which is really cool, but the music, the original theme by Silvestri and then also the soundtrack, is just so good,
Mm.
to this movie. Like, this is where I got my first taste of, like, CCR and, like, this is the first time I heard All Along the Watchtower by Jimi Hendrix,
Hmm.
and, like, I didn't even know that. I was like, "Oh, that's Jimi Hendrix. Okay." It was from, Forrest Gump. I had no idea. Like,
Yeah.
it's such a good time capsule, and it's also, like, relevant to the time frames that where he's present, where the movie takes place, which is awesome.
Yeah, there's parts of this movie that almost surf on just the songs that are happening.
Mhm.
Like there's periods, especially when he gets into like the running sequences, where it's just like you're hearing 30-second snippets of songs and barely any narration and barely any like talking on the actual screen,
Mm.
and you're kind of understanding the journey and the ups and downs that he's going through.
Yeah. Yeah,
Here,
Run It on Empty when he's running across America is so good. Like, I
uh,
don't there's no other song that they could have chosen at the time,
so
which is great.
Silvestri did lose to Hans Zimmer for The Lion King, so I guess that is acceptable
If
in
you're
this
gonna
case.
lose, you should lose to Zimmer. Yeah.
Can I just Oh, I was looking at the Oscars page and I almost thought Tarantino won an Oscar for Forrest Gump, but no, he won for uh
Pulp
did he
Fiction.
win for Pulp Fiction? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um that was original screenplay.
Mhm. Oh, he took
Um
the original that year, yeah.
yeah, I really I love the Oscar wins for this movie. I think it's fun when a fun movie wins Best Picture.
Mhm.
I think Hanks is really good in this. I really love that this movie won Best Visual Effects. So Zemeckis that we were talking about is kind of like a pioneer in the visual effects world in film. He's
Mhm.
always kind of pushing the envelope in different ways. He had previously won his movie had previously won Death Becomes Her,
Yes.
which again was kind of like a smaller film. You wouldn't expect to win like the visual effects Oscar, but there's a lot of cool stuff happening
So
with like
much cool shit.
body shit
Yeah,
in that movie.
it rules.
Um, and then this movie, Forrest Gump, also doesn't have like Avengers level explosions or space sequences in it or anything like that. But like it's kind of fascinating how many shots in this movie like have a visual effect in one way or another. Like
Mhm.
all of the ping pong balls are
Yeah.
animated.
Yep.
A- All of like the rain in those sequences. There's scenes where like the rain is just completely not actually there when they're
Yeah.
walking around in Vietnam. Um,
Vietnam.
all of the fucking creepy like president scenes when he meets the presidents like 4 times, and it looks insane the way they like move their mouths in like a deep fake kind of way, that and like
Oh
John
god.
Lennon.
It's so bad, but again, like you're saying, like, it was pioneering
Yeah.
the technology at the time of just like, I can't believe they were able to do that and do it kinda convincingly for 1994.
Hmm.
Obviously, it looks so bad now, but,
Hmm.
like, I'm surprised they hadn't gone back and, you know, edited it a little bit, which wouldn't be that hard, but I understand kind of preserving the time capsuleness of the movie.
I love a visual effects win that is for making things appear to look normal when they aren't actually, rather than like creating new worlds or new backgrounds and stuff. So
Yeah, yeah.
we have a movie on our list that I'm going to make you watch at some point, called Parasite, that won Best Picture a few weeks back, and it's a seemingly normal movie. Normal movie. It's seemingly, it takes place in a seemingly normal place. It's just like this like rich people's house in
Mhm.
Korea, and then you look at the behind the scenes, and it's like it's the same type of thing where it's kind of fascinating, like how much of it is a visual effect,
Mhm.
in certain ways, just to like build out certain parts of the house, and you never notice it at all in the movie. And
Yeah.
it's so cool, uh how, like, I'm sure there's a term for it, in that world, but
Sure. Yeah.
visual effects that like aren't supposed to be noticed, but you would notice them if they weren't there.
Right.
um
Yeah. It just adds atmosphere. It adds that kind of stuff. Yeah, I had no idea about the rain. I knew about the ping pong balls,
mhm.
that, like, Ryan mentioned it this past go around. It's just like, did Tom Hanks have to become, like, an expert level ping pong player? And I was like, "No, they
Mhm.
just told him just to swing and everything else was digitally added," which is super rad.
And it looks really good. I mean, the ping pong stuff looks really good.
It holds up, unlike the deep fake, um, mouth stuff from the I mean, but that's a neat framing device. It's a neat, film technique of just, like, let's take archival footage and,
Mhm.
like, superimpose Forrest in. So, like, it makes sense, like, he would go on Captain Kangaroo and meet John Lennon, or he would, meet several presidents and show his ass on TV. Like, it's really ridiculous and so much fun. Um, yeah, so, let's see, let's talk about this movie's just, like, lasting impact and why it's my favorite, and then, the performances. Um the also, I love this movie's also just filled with motifs. I love the visual motif of the old men in the barber shop, essentially
Uh-huh.
kind of just like watching Forrest's life unfold before their eyes, either like right outside the shop or via TV.
Yep.
So fun. They're never mentioned. They're never really acknowledged, but it's such a cool thing to come back to them. And it's just like, oh, it's just the same three old men in a barber shop, or the same, like, you see the same doctor callback when his mom's dying. It's the same doctor, the same actor, and then at the very end, it's, like, the daughter of Dorothy Harris or whatever, the bus driver, like, really cool
Mhm.
stuff, really fun.
I mean, yeah, there's this implication that he comes from this small fictional town in Alabama where, even though he has like such a profound impact on literally the rest of the world, he's just a normal guy
He's just a
there,
normal guy.
and no one really
Yeah.
cares. He's just kind of mowing the lawns.
Yeah, he loves to mow lawns, which I love, which is his fun thing. Um let's see. Oh, this time around, I noticed that the comedy was way more prevalent than I could ever remember. I laughed so much at this most recent go round. This movie's
Mhm.
really, really, really funny.
Yeah. Yeah, his line about, shouting at the guy that, Jenny should move back to Greenbow, Alabama, I laughed out loud.
Oh
Ugh.
yeah, the my favorite part is at the end when she's getting on the bus and he's smiling at her, and she gets on, and then goes to get on the bus and he looks back at him and he like cuts his eyes at him, and
He's giving him, like, the shit look.
I know, I love it.
"I'm
Uh,
sorry, I started a fight at your Black Panther party."
Yeah, oh, Forrest Gump is a habitual party ruiner because he ruined the Black Panther party, and then he ruined, who was it? Other's party did he ruin? He ruined somebody else's party, and, very funny. I
Where
think that's
was I was trying to find the quote, hang on, I'll, like, search for it. Oh, I got it. "I met some of America's best young men who served in this war. There was Dallas from Phoenix, Cleveland, he was from Detroit, and Tex, well, I don't remember where Tex come from."
such a fun thing, just like
Oh, it's
but
so
and,
funny.
and that's something that just sticks in your brain because it's so memorable. Whoever, like, I'm assuming it was Winston Groom who had a hand in a lot of the dialogue, or maybe not, but, like, the dialogue is so memorable, and,
Mhm.
just things that you can, because I had a hard time of just, like, I wanna think of, like, my favorite quotes from this movie, but anytime, like, the scene would jump to the next thing and be like, "I have 30, I can't just write the whole movie."
Well,
Um,
yeah, every conversation he has with a person that he meets is like a battle of wills for these people trying to like bring him down to their level of reality, and he just won't be broken and won't be swayed from his ways and his
you
upbringing.
can't. You can't be. You can't bring a good man down.
And
Um,
then I think it makes the ones who kind of shine through all the brighter. Again, like Jenny doesn't get much time in this movie almost
no,
intentionally. She's kind of like put on the back burner, but I think so many of the scenes that they share are obviously like the emotional heart of this movie. There's they kind of intercept throughout the movie, and then a lot of the ending is her living with them, and then they obviously eventually have a kid. And there's a moment in this movie where I was reminded of Castaway because there's kind of like
mm,
parallel scenes between the two. Have you ever seen Castaway?
I love Castaway.
Love Castaway. So it's still Silvestri, it's still Zemeckis, it's still Hanks, right? So
It's
like
yep,
that pairing is back again.
power trio.
Um, And Castaway also ends with like this kind of like really quiet monologue where Tom Hanks is remembering things from being on this island that he was stranded on for 4 years.
Yeah,
And you got the Silvestri music, very similar to this movie, and it's very similar to the scene at the end of this movie where like Forrest is recapping to Jenny. I can't remember if
oh
she's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
died at this point. Like
She's laying in bed, and he's talking about the his adventures essentially,
it
right?
kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's like this deeply like beautiful moment where again like it gets past the gimmick of him being in and out of history that you've experienced for the past 2 hours and really shines a light on like no, these were his individual experiences. He talks about like,
Yeah,
oh, one time that it stopped raining in Vietnam and I got to see the stars, and one time I was running through Monument Valley and it looked like heaven. And there's like this mournful moment because Jenny realizes like she kind of missed out on all of this because she was on her own path in life. And then there's obviously the beautiful line of like, no, she was with him the whole time.
yeah,
um
yeah, because he mentions it every story chapter. It's like, I thought about Jenny all the time, and he's
mhm,
on the boat, or he's in Vietnam, or he's playing ping pong, like all this kind of stuff. He always brings it up, so it's not a surprise when he says that at the end, but it still hits.
mhm,
It's still great. Um, let's talk about the performances for a second. Obviously, Tom Hanks is just fantastic. He's
mhm,
so sweet, so lovable, so innocent in his portrayal of this character. And it's immediately iconic. Like, I could not imagine another contemporary of his at the time playing this character and having it be this good.
mhm. It's obviously a really like heightened performance. He's obviously like doing a thing here. He's playing uh, a low IQ person, but also giving that person like the same levels of like comedy and drama that you would give a normal character. And so
Mhm.
Forrest has moments when he's kind of like going with the flow, and Hanks plays it that way. You can tell when Forrest is comfortable, you can tell when Forrest is uncomfortable, and then you can also tell when Forrest is like experiencing these like deep emotions.
It's so subtle.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks's portrayal of those emotions are a masterclass.
Hmm.
Because like you said, he's not only is he playing, like a disabled character, but like to be able to also emote in a very subtle emotional way. And the example I'm thinking of is at the end when he meets little Forrest, and she's like, "Yeah, I named him Forrest," or his name's Forrest. He's like, "Oh, hey, that's my name." And she's like, "Yeah, I named him after his daddy." And he's like, the emotional processing that you see in his eyes is just so heartbreaking, and it's just so masterfully done.
And
I
it's It's placed at that point in the movie, and it's earned at that point.
Yeah.
You'd think, like, it maybe wouldn't have as much impact at the beginning just because you don't know this character, but after spending 2 hours with this character, you know what it means for him to have a reaction like that.
Mhm.
And so that point, in the movie, and then also the point at Jenny's grave where
Oh,
his voice basically breaks and he breaks down for, like, the first time. Like,
yeah.
I can't help but feel it with him.
Oh god, I know. Like, the last 20 minutes of the movie is just gut-wrenching. It hurts every time, but it hurts so good because it feels so great. Because Tom Hanks carried you there
Mhm.
while running. Sally Field is also fantastic in this. She's in this a lot less than I remember,
Yeah.
but still a great, great mother figure.
She's in she's throughout the childhood portion of the movie, which is like the first 20 minutes, and then she's got like 2 or 3 big scenes throughout the movie before her character dies.
Yeah,
Um,
but it
but
still
yeah,
hurts.
she's fantastic. I mean, she's responsible for a lot of like the iconic quotes in the movie, and she's responsible for the upbringing of this character and like his moral center that drives his actions in so much of this film.
Yeah, she is yeah, the ideological cornerstone to, uh, Forrest's entire being, and, it hurts to see her go, but she's really great,
Mhm.
in this, even though she does, something questionable towards the beginning to get him into school. I had
You do what you gotta do, Jess.
For your kids, yeah. I
Yep.
had never noticed before in that scene where he's outside just swinging, I'd always focused on him because he's in the foreground and he's just swinging while the insane sounds are going on inside the house. But if you look in the background and you look in the bedroom window, the lamp in the window is, like,
Yeah.
going to town. So, like, that principal is giving it to Mrs. Gump, and, he's trying real hard, which he eventually comes out later, and he is all out of breath, and he's sweating, so he went to town, Pound Town.
Sally Field cares about his education. We should all be
Yeah.
so lucky.
We should all be so lucky, yeah. There must be something that we can do. Robin Robin Wright is such a as Jenny, is such a complicated character, but I
I
think she
I think she's great.
executes flawlessly, yes.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's a person who is thrust into these desperate situations, these, um like indulgent lifestyle kind of things, experimenting with drugs and sex and like
Mhm.
the free hippie movement and all that kind of stuff. But like, she comes around full circle later and, settles down with Forrest. But, I've seen the thing like an argument of like, is Jenny the villain of Forrest Gump?
I mean, I don't know. I think it's a lot more complicated than that. You could definitely make the argument like she emotionally um leans on him in a way that maybe is not reciprocated. But maybe she's also not meant to be playing this perfectly balanced character. I mean, that's kind of the whole deal with her is like maybe she isn't supposed to be this like very simple or naive character. I think Robin Wright has kind of the perfect level of like coldness in her eyes,
Ooh,
if that
yeah.
makes sense. As like an actress,
100%.
she's got that Michelle Pfeiffer thing. She's got that ice woman thing,
Yeah.
where there's always a bit of her that's like, and like it falls in line with the story. Like she lost her innocence way too young, and so she knows too much about
The world?
the,
Yeah.
the the bad parts of the world in the
Yeah.
same way that Forrest trusts in the good parts of the world, and
Mhm.
so I like obviously again the movie spotlight is on Forrest, but like the dance that they do from those two ends of things, I think the last like 30 minutes or so of this movie when they are kind of together for most of it, and figuring out what that looks like is again like more earned, than you would think,
Yeah.
because the movie has shown just like what it took to get them here,
Yeah.
um, even though Like she clearly, I mean, it's implied, but like she absolutely like dies of AIDS at the end of this. Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely a non-communicable virus
Right.
disease. D and there's so many questions involved, like, is Forrest at risk? Is little Forrest at risk? Did she get this
Hmm.
after the fact? Like, what was left unsaid? Um, but I mean, I think, you could look at it one way of like that's her, paying penitence for her exploits in her
Hmm.
life previously, but she was only 37. She was my age when she died, like, which is wild to think of the given the life that she lived. But like, I don't think that's it. I think they kind of did her dirty a little bit. But it serves the story.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I'd be interested in reading smarter people's take around her ending in this
Hmm.
movie. I really like her existence in this movie. But I maybe haven't had enough time to like really think through what I think of like where this movie ends with her.
Hmm.
Because she comes back to Forest when it maybe seems like she has nowhere else to go. They have this like wonderful, few months, few years, you don't really know together, which results in her becoming pregnant. And then she leaves immediately and kind of like hides that fact from him for a few years.
Yeah,
And then you could also argue like she invites him back into her life just because she knows she's dying, right? And she needs someone to take care of the kid. And so there's a lot of like moral complexity there. There's a lot of like
sure.
reality there. But
Yeah.
I think she's one example of two in this movie of just like characters within Forrest's orbit who are so resistant to his whole entire deal until he is able to chip away at them, and so they are able to kind of accept the peace and simplicity that he represents. And the other one, of course, I'm talking about is Gary Sinise, who I
The
think
gold
is
star.
so fucking good in this movie.
Lieutenant Dan Taylor, his entire character arc is so great. And it only, is outshone by Tom Hanks's Forrest Gump
Hmm.
by molecules, honestly. Gary Sinise absolutely kills it in the Lieutenant Dan role, as this, you know, again, like similarly kind of tragic backstory. Like you don't really get too much of his backstory, but you understand the type of person he is when we first come across him in Vietnam and being utterly torn down from where he was on his pedestal to reaching literal rock bottom, alcoholism, all this kind of stuff, and similar kind of suicidal vibes with Jenny's parallel. But
Hmm.
once he's spent enough time with Forrest, it cuts away all of that remaining former life, the way that he used to think, and becomes in this affluent, successful businessman. Like he's the one who turned Forrest on to investing in Apple. So like
Such a funny moment.
such a cool
Um,
moment. Some fruit company, you know.
it's like it's fun to think about the Oscars that this movie wins and how much of them are almost like directly related to the Gary Sinise presence in this movie.
Mm.
So this movie wins adapted screenplay. So many of the best lines in this movie come from Sinise and kind of the foil that he creates for Forrest in terms of like his negative outlook on the world, his kind of insane outlook on war compared to Forrest's
Yeah.
outlook. And then you also have obviously the visual effects that we talked about. Lieutenant Dan loses both of his legs, and so almost every shot afterwards is kind of an incredible miracle of
Yeah.
visual effects with his legs,
Yeah.
and the way that they don't really like try to hide it in any way, which is really cool. Like
Mhm.
I think he's in a wheelchair for a big portion of it, and they had to get like a magician to kind of like design him like a box to sit in, and like so you can have kind of the leg stumps there. But then
Yeah.
so his character without the legs is so dynamic.
Yeah.
He's kind of moving around these scenes. The legs are moving around, and you can you can see where the early effects there, and how revolutionary it was to be able to basically wipe his actual Gary Sinise legs out of the frame and replace them with nothing in
Digital,
this
yeah,
case.
which is really cool. I've seen the behind the scenes of, like, the shot where he goes to, like, before he jumps into the ocean and, like, make his peace with God kind of
Hmm.
thing, where he, like, hops up on the side of the boat and, like, flips around, like, he does, like, a
Hmm.
swivel. They, like there's a hole cut in the side of the boat where his legs could just naturally kinda just, like, cut in, but then they digitally, painted it out, like, so cool. Such
Yeah.
a cool thing, but, yeah, like, I love just the whole full circle moment leading up to that scene, where he's like, "I never thanked you for saving my life." And
Hmm.
it's so earned, and it feels so good at that scene to have that of just like, "Hey, good for you, Forrest. Good for you. What you did."
It's such a good example of like this movie could have been perfectly fine if it had treated his character as kind of just like a one chapter character. Like he's just in the Vietnam portion, maybe in the hospital a little bit afterwards, and then like he exits Forrest's life. Forrest learns a lesson. We all learn a lesson. But then like 20 minutes later, you hear his voice. Forrest is like, well, that's Lieutenant Dan. And then
Yeah.
he's this extremely like down and out Vietnam War veteran, experiencing the other side of that coin. And the movie is so much richer for it, for having him
Yeah.
in the next 30 minutes.
Absolutely.
And being able to like you experience kind of you've had these sweet moments with Forrest and his mom, and Forrest and Jenny, and Forrest and Bubba to an extent, and now like Forrest is kind of up against a different kind of adversary in this
Yeah.
point. Like, will he be able to prevail and crack the shell here? Which he
Mhm.
does.
Yeah. The time that he spends in New York City with Lieutenant Dan is like, I love '70s grimy New York. It's such a vibe,
it looks
especially in the winter.
it
It
looks
looks
so good. She smelled like cigarettes.
Yeah. Oh, man. But and then that's when you get, like, a shred of his, turn of character, Lieutenant Dan's turn of character, his shred of dignity coming back.
Hmm.
'Cause, one of the girls calls Forrest stupid, and he loses his shit on her, and,
Yeah.
"Don't you ever call him stupid," and I love it. You love him to see him go to bat for his boy.
You love the growth there because like you can tell he goes from like not caring about Forrest to defending Forrest, but not necessarily being nice to Forrest, to then ultimately like making peace and meeting Forrest one on one.
Yeah, I kinda wish, like, when he comes back into Forrest's life, it's only, like, 10 minutes later,
Mhm.
after the New York scene, because that's when he goes and he plays ping pong for a while, and then he magically gets the $25,000 check. To wit, he then buys a boat,
Mhm.
and 3 Dr. Peppers, which, today's episode brought to you by Dr. Pepper.
Oh,
Drink it, it's spicy, it's your life.
we'll get
Spice up
into it.
your
Hang
life.
on. I want to find that full quote because it's really funny the way he says it. Hang on. I'm going to try to. I have like the full quotes page pulled up. I'm going to try to find it.
Hell yeah.
Uh, I don't think it's on here, but he
Oh, when
like
he's at Bubba's grave? Yeah.
when he's trying to he's talking about like what he did with the full 25,000 because it starts out as 25,000 and then he's like I bought gas and a new suit and I took mama out to a really nice dinner and then I bought 3 Dr. Peppers and then with the change left over I bought this shrimp boat.
Yep. It's so good. Yeah, I speaking of Dr. Pepper and why this episode is brought to you by Dr. Pepper, the Dr. Pepper company. Is that Pepsi? Is that a PepsiCo thing? I don't know. Or is Dr. Pepper its own thing? I think.
I think this is maybe slander. I want to say Mr. Pibb is Coke and Dr. Pepper is Pepsi, but that may be backwards.
Okay.
Those are the rivals.
It always stuck with me that this movie is such a Dr. Pepper like stan
Mhm.
because Forrest Gump loves Dr. Pepper, and therefore I love Dr. Pepper.
It's just fun to hear him say Dr. Pepper. Did your love of Dr. Pepper come from Forrest Gump?
It might have. I don't remember like trying Dr. Pepper beforehand, but I remember living in Texas, and this was like water uh, down there. That like Dr. Pepper and Big Red. I don't know if you know Big Red, but it's a Texas drink. carbonated red soda. Dr. Pepper and Big Red were like kept me barely hydrated as a child.
I
Um,
just I just want to correct the record. I googled it. Dr Pepper is owned by not Coke or Pepsi, but Keurig.
that must be a
So
recent acquisition.
sit with that for a second.
I won't. Um, before we wrap up, um, one other thing I wanted to talk about, one scene in particular that I had. So I talked about already how I'd never noticed during the mom principal lovemaking scene that the lamp is going absolutely bonkers.
Uh huh. You
Um,
want to talk about the other jizz scene in this movie?
I'm going to talk about the other scene involving jizz. I never picked up on in any of my previous viewings that when Forrest goes to Jenny's dorm room and she shows him her tits and she lets him feel that he immediately busts a nut all over her roommate's
Yeah.
robe. I
It,
never
it
knew
is a
that.
it is a funny moment. I absolutely never picked up on it either.
Never
Uh,
ever.
that was my stopping point for night one of watching this movie, and I think I
That's a hell of
immediately
a place
texted
to
you.
start.
I texted you because we were both watching it, and I was like, "Yeah, he just
Force
came."
just came. Like, I never knew that, and then the line of so I always viewed it and remember it as him just, like, being embarrassed.
Right.
Like, he's just like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry." But now
No.
watching it, it's just like, oh, he's like,
It's because they make a joke about, like, how it is specifically her roommate's sweater, and then Jenny's like, "I don't even like her," and then she's awake listening to them the whole
that scene is so fucking funny, like, my god, it's so good. I love that someone thought that up and, either, Winston Groom or whoever else in the writer's room was like, "No, I got this. Check it out. He's gonna
time.
jizz."
You want to just
Ridiculous.
do like rapid fire opinions? First off, before we end, I want to say I have been eating a box of chocolates this entire time. I paired it with kind of like a Kahlua rum cocktail. I'm calling it like a almost full box of chocolates because it's very thematic to this movie.
Amazing. I do love that anytime he comes near a box of chocolates, he has to eat some.
Yeah,
Very good. I'm just drinking just a straight up fucking Dr. Pepper because why
I
the
think
hell
that
not?
fits. I
I
think that fits.
was gonna do a thing called a flaming Dr. Pepper, and that is you take a glass, like a pint glass, and you fill it up like halfway with just lager, just straight up regular beer, and then you take a shot glass of amaretto, and then you put 151 on top, and then you light that on fire, and you drop it in the beer, and you slam it, and it tastes like Dr. Pepper from what I remember.
It sounds like an
Kind of.
atom bomb to your insides.
Yeah, so I was like, I just want a regular Dr. Pepper because we're throwing the rules out for this episode. We're not really doing or I didn't do a regular cocktail and no trailer and no in game. We're just gonna
Yeah,
just shower love on this movie,
we're
much
gonna cut
like
to black like The Sopranos any second now.
yeah. No, we're gonna shower this movie in love, much like Forrest showered Jenny's roommate's robe in love. Um
I think that's all we have to say about that.
All right, guys, catch us later. Um, yeah, rapid fire thoughts, Joe, on this movie.
um, I think Bubba. We didn't really talk about the actor who plays Bubba. I think he's really good. I like his shrimp monologue about how it carries over for what is implied to be multiple days of him talking about shrimp, and then he
Yeah,
just ends. He ends talking about like shrimp salad. He's just listing
that's
off
that
different
that
shrimp.
that's about it. Oh yeah, it's so good. Yeah, his interactions finding a kindred spirit, like a fellow brother in
Hmm.
Bubba is so great, and they have such little time together, but his death still hurts a lot
Hmm.
when it happens. Um,
Pretty
that
great
act
war sequence.
It's a great war sequence. It's
Yeah.
terrifying when the rain stops and the sun comes up and then the shells just start flying.
I
Absolutely
thought
terrifying.
that it happened, and I kind of like jumped in my seat and gave a little yelp, a little
Ye
bit.
Yep, yeah, it's loud, it's
There's a lot of
unexpected.
blood.
There's a lot of that, and there's, like, some graphic, depictions of, like, battle wounds and people getting blown up, and then
Yeah,
just like the whole forest getting eviscerated by napalm, like insane war sequence. Very good.
yeah.
But yes, the actor, I don't have his name in front of me, but who portrayed Bubba, very good, very great, opposite of Tom Hanks.
I think Robin Wright again is really good in the moments where Jenny is again it's really like high melodrama and all that, but she is considering suicide in
Oh,
certain scenes in this movie. And it's always kind of like related to her jumping off of um a high platform in a way. And so
mhm.
there's kind of the double motif of like birds being the symbol for Jenny in this way, both in the way of like she may want to kill herself in that way by like flying
Yeah,
essentially, but then also that translates into once she's actually dead, birds kind of become the symbol of her presence to
her,
Forest.
her freedom. Yeah, which is yeah, both beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. Yeah, that is a brilliant bit of visual storytelling, of subtle storytelling too, of just the metaphor of birds coming back, always praying to make me a bird and fly far, far away.
Hmm.
Um, really great stuff. What else you got?
I'm looking through the quotes right now.
Magic shoes, magic legs, Lieutenant Dan ice cream.
I like how the running sequence kind of becomes its own mini version of the film, and like they're like
Oh,
rapid fire, seeing like how many cultural moments can he start with this. So you have like the happy face moment on the shirt, you have the shit
oh,
happens bumper sticker.
yeah, that's
It's
right.
real fun.
Yeah, it's super cool. Oh, who else does he help out? Um,
I think it's just
sh-
that. I think it's that, and then he basically gets like a running cult going behind him.
oh, it's
Um,
the shit happens bumper sticker. Yeah, and the smiley face thing. Yeah, that's right. Oh, okay, real quick. You mentioned the run thing. Have you ever eaten at the restaurant, Bubba Gump Shrimp Company?
no, no. I the only place I've seen it is like Universal Orlando, like City Walk. I
Yeah,
don't. I'm always confused about how real it actually is, or is it just like in places that are movie centric, like Universal? Like, is
I
it
don't.
an actual restaurant chain?
I think it is. They have multiple locations, but I've only been to the one in Universal. The menu items are, as you can imagine, based on a movie. The menu items are insane. They include such wonderful things as the following: the Run Across America sampler, Jenny's salmon and shrimp, Lieutenant Dan's pork ribs and shrimp, the
Okay.
box of chocolates assortment dessert. It's not a box of chocolates, it's like truffles and other fun things with a, you know, commemorative tin that you get to take home. And the last one is my favorite. It's called the Rum Forest Rum Cocktail. It's so absurd. I love kitschy shit. Yeah, I love this movie. It's so good. We for all the reasons we talked about. Almost every single scene is iconic for some reason. For some reason or another, whether
Yeah.
it's a great piece of dialogue, whether it's a fantastic piece of cinematography, or it's an incredible performance, um, acting performance by anyone on screen.
I
Um,
mean, yeah, I knew of parodies of this movie before I even knew of this movie. We would watch Veggie Tales growing up. They parodied Forrest Gump. We would watch like one of the Aladdin sequels. Genie has like a moment where he transforms into Forrest Gump on a bench and he's like shooting magic out of his fingers. It's really funny.
that's so good. Yeah, and I'm sure it's been parodied on SNL, Mad TV, a number of children's shows. Like it's just immersed itself in the American fabric, which is insane. But yeah, Forrest Gump is a habitual party ruiner. Um, he does that. Um, and then yeah, the Ginny, um, complicated character of it all. Just is she a bad person for what she does, or is she just a victim of circumstance? and a bad upbringing. Who knows? Who's to say? Like you said, maybe there's smarter people. There's just smarter video essays about it out
Yeah, I
there.
mean, I don't know if you have to think about it through bad or good. I think this movie is trying to portray like a
The
reality
real,
with her.
yeah,
So,
which is
yeah.
which is all you could ever really want. But yeah, that's Forrest Gump. I love this movie so much, and you know, even though like as a younger kid, I always said this was my favorite movie, and maybe that was just like a way to like be cool or whatever.
Uh-huh.
But I will stand firmly 2 feet planted in the ground, and stand up to anybody and say like, yeah, this movie fucking rules, and it's my favorite movie. So
This was a fun rewatch. I hadn't seen it in maybe like 5 to 10 years at this point.
mhm,
I'm glad I kind of checked the box again.
it's wonderful.
It's a good movie.
Um, yeah. So this is our 50th episode, and we decided to break our own rules a little bit because we can, and we watched a favorite movie of one of ours. So Joe, where are we going next? What are we going to do now?
Yeah. So, like we said, we may sprinkle in some more quote unquote culture club episodes in the future where we just want to talk about a movie that we've both seen because we can. But this Forrest Gump episode will kind of represent our September miniseries, and going into October is a miniseries that I've been really excited about and looking forward to. We're going to talk about Winona Ryder. We're going to have a Winona month. So with this one Forrest Gump episode, we've kind of like switched up who goes first. So I will be going first. I'm going to have Justin. I'm going to give Justin the astute privilege of watching the 1994 Little Women, starring Winona Ryder.
Oh,
I'm so excited. This has been a movie I've wanted to hit since we started.
we're sticking into 1994. Like a lot of these movies has an
Yeah,
interesting cross section of like mid to late 90s, and I think that's so great. I mean, because obviously we're 90s kids,
yeah,
but
kind of concept of the podcast. Yeah,
it's kind of what we do. We should have called the podcast 90s whatever, but everyone does that. It's fuck it.
yeah. There's already those already exist.
But yeah, I'm excited to spend the first half of Spooky Month talking about Little Women. Um the concept of
When you put it like that.
tiny adult women coming after you, I'm frightened.
Uh-huh.
Um and then we're going to follow it up with my pick, which is also which is kind of a little more apt for the season, and we're going to do fuck, not Beetlejuice. What are we doing? Oh, we're doing Edward Scissorhands. That's
You're doing
right.
Edward Scissorhands. Yeah.
Edward Scissorhands, which Joe has never seen, which is great. So a Winona month, and then you know what? I'll probably watch the first season of Stranger Things again because Winona is great in that too. Uh,
Ooh, that's a
yeah,
good note. Maybe I should get back into that.
yeah. I remember that first season coming out, and it was just like, holy shit, this is why everyone loves Winona.
It's
She's
insane
fucking
that we're at a point where we can be nostalgic for the first season of the nostalgia dripping Stranger Things.
yeah,
Time marches on.
and it waits for no one.
Yes.
um.
Very
Anyway,
good, Justin.
very good, Joe. So let's yeah, we'll catch you guys later. Be on the lookout for new episodes and things wherever you get your pods casted at, and catch us on all the socials at Uncultured Universe. We will catch you guys later. Run, Joe, run.
Bye.